Hello everybody, my name is Ian Griffin with Nyle Dry Kilns. Today we're going to showcase some of the controls and how they operate our heat recovery vents, our HRVs. This particular controller you're looking at right now is from our NDKR line, one of our retrofit controllers. So we'll talk about the settings and how your deadbands and other various things affect the HRV and how it runs, as well as your traditional vents. So first things first, you can ignore this fault right here. The PLC I'm recording this on is a bench model. It doesn't actually have an HRV hooked up to it, which means that there's no input feedback, no communication, so it's throwing a fault code. But we can ignore that because it's not relevant for the actual controls part of the demo. I just wanted to get that out there so people would understand. So we're going to look at our wet bulb set point, because that is going to be kind of important for talking about this piece of equipment. Since your wet bulb is your humidity control, it tells the kiln when to vent, or in this case, when to turn the HRV on. So we're going to keep that 90 Fahrenheit in mind. We'll click on here, go to our Vent and HRV tab, and we're going to see on our left box, we have our vent control and some information. And on our right box, we have our HRV control and some more information. So right now there's no HRV plugged in. It's not actually running. So all these values are 0. If your HRV was running, it would have an RPM value, it would have an amperage and a frequency value based on how fast it was running, how fast the fans were turning. Now, on both of these, you can click on this little green box and you can set it to manual, which will allow you to put in a speed setting. If you wanted to run it at 50% constantly, you could do that. If you wanted to run it at 25% constantly, you could do that as well. You could manually shut it off so that regardless of whatever settings in the kiln, the HRV wouldn't turn on. And then if you are in auto, it is going to run based off of your wet bulb set point. If you're either in manual mode or running a schedule, it'll still run off of that wet bulb set point. Your vent control is functionally similar. You'll have your manual and your off and your auto, and they work kind of exactly the same. The main thing you may notice is there are some values plugged in here, a 93 and a 92. And that's kind of why the 90 set point is critical, because what this means right here is that your vents will not open. Now, not your HRV, your traditional vents will not open until you're 3 degrees above your wet bulb set point, and then they'll shut off at 2 degrees above your wet bulb set point. And what that means is that the HRV will do the bulk of the venting. If you're only a degree or 2 above set point, your HRV is going to be the only thing venting, and your traditional vents will not open, which is what you want. You want ideally all your venting to go through that HRV. You get that heat recovery, you get that energy efficiency. That's kind of the whole purpose of that piece of equipment. So you would only ever want your vents to open is if you're getting so much water in the kiln that the HRV can't keep up, which, as long as your kiln is sized correctly for the correct species, that should never happen. So we're going to look at this right here, your Edit Deadbands tab, and we're going to kind of see how that's customizable to a certain extent. Over here are the values for when your vents turn off and on. So that 3 degrees above set point and that 2 degrees below set point. So I'll change this real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. Now your vent will open at 4 degrees above set point and shut off at 2 degrees above set point. Put that back to 3 and we'll leave that there for now. Now your HRV, you have your same kind of deadband. You have when it turns on and when it turns off. So as of right now, it would turn on at 91 degrees and then shut back off at 90. We're going to change that. 0 and then -1. So now the HRV will turn on at set point and it will shut off at 1 degree below set point. So that kind of just showcases how it's customizable. There are so many different facilities for all our customers. The species are different, the kilns are different. This kind of adds that little bit of flexibility where the user can customize your deadbands. It is important to note, you never want these to match exactly. You never want to have a 0 and a 0, for example. What that means is your HRV will try to turn on directly at set point, and then if it gets even just a fraction of a degree below set point, it'll immediately try to completely shut off, which is kind of really hard on equipment. You want that little bit of a buffer, give motors time to spin up, give actuators time to open, and then they can close or slow down as necessary. So a 1 degree deadband is, I think, kind of the safe minimum. And then this full speed offset right here, what that means is if it's set to 1 degree on an HRV, it'll take 1 full degree to modulate up to full speed. So if we're at 91 degrees and it turns on, it'll turn on at 25% because that's the minimum speed it'll turn on to. And as you climb up to 92%, it'll ramp up faster and faster. And at 92, it'll be going full speed. And then that way it won't work any harder than it needs to maintain your wet bulb set point. And again, all of these are customizable. You just have to understand what you're doing and how it can affect your kiln. So this controller right here is an NSC 100, and it's quite common on a lot of our kilns. There's a lot of different versions of the program out there. If yours differs in some way, shape, or form, then you can kind of try to follow along. I can point out where it will likely be different. And then if you have any questions or concerns, or it's something's a little bit out there, you can always feel free to reach out to us and give us a call with any specific questions, or if you need any kind of assistance with any of our products, we're happy to help. So first things first, we're going to look at our wet bulb set point right here, that 90 degrees, because that's going to be kind of important when we talk about how the HRV and the vents interact. Since your wet bulb set point is your humidity control, it tells the kiln when to vent, when the HRV to turn on. That's going to be the most important value throughout this talk. So we're going to go to our vent close tab right here. We're going to open that up. Now this particular kiln has two of our HRV rooftop units on it. So if you have a stand-up unit or one of the ones that goes onto the back of the kiln, this screen may look a little bit different. When you first click on that, it may have a series of tabs that are manual, open, closed, percent mode, something like that. And then over here, there should be a tab that says HRV. If you click on that, it'll open a screen that's somewhat similar to this one. It'll have these same off, auto, manual buttons, and they're functionally the same. The screen may just look a little bit different. So as you are trying to operate your HRV, you can manually shut it off right here. You can put it so that it's manually on all the time. You can change this percent value so that the HRV will run at 25% or 50% or 75%. We do have all of our fans and our HRVs set to a 25% minimum so that the motors don't burn out at really, really low speeds. We have had experiences with that sort of thing happen, so we set to a 25% minimum. And then if you're in auto, the HRV is going to operate based on your wet bulb set point. And I'll explain how that works in a minute. Your rooftop vent control, those are your traditional vents, just flaps or some other thing that opens up and lets air out of the kiln and air back into the kiln, not powered. And those function the same way. You have an off, a manual, and an auto. If your vents have some kind of actuator so that they can modulate, then you could also go into manual and put a manual set point in for how far you want them to open. If your vents are set up to just go fully open and fully closed, then that function won't be enabled. And then the most important thing is your HRV differential set point and your rooftop vent set point. Now, what that means is that's the actual trigger point compared to your wet bulb set point that piece of equipment will turn on. So an HRV differential set point of 0 means the HRV will turn on at set point, and then it will shut back off 1 degree below set point. This program has all the deadbands kind of hard-coded into the program. So they're all based off 1 degree increments. So if you wanted to have it, your HRV turn on at 1 degree above set point and then shut off at set point, then you could change this to a 1. And then that's kind of what it would do in that situation. Your rooftop vents function the same. They would open at this point at 5 degrees above set point, and they would close at 4 degrees above set point for that same 1 degree deadband. It is very important to note, you want to get all your venting through your HRV. That's how you get that energy efficiency. That's how you get that heat recovery that they're named after. So you always want to make sure that your rooftop vent set point is higher than your HRV set point. so that your HRV will do all the venting as much as possible unless it can no longer keep up, and you hit your vent set point, and then your vents will open to help vent moisture if necessary. Normally, I recommend people run a rooftop vent set point of about 3 degrees. This particular kiln is actually a southern yellow pine kiln. There's a massive amount of moisture that comes off very early on, and we want to try to get as much of the venting through the HRV as possible. So we actually run a slightly higher vet set point so that the HRV has time to kind of catch up to that water removal and get it back down before the vents will kick on to support it. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you guys have any questions or concerns or want some specific details about your particular program, if you notice something slightly different, feel free to reach out. Our number is 800-777-6953. Thank you.